A hailstorm caused some damage to our house a while back. Not to worry, we turned our frowns upside down and used it as an opportunity to do some remodeling. In this video, I'll focus on the updates I made to our entry. First step was to pull down the stone, which was easy because it was falling off anyway. After that, I got to work on the columns. I opened them up just to see what was going on. Of course, I bumped into some interesting work. I ordered some 6x6 structural cedar posts and got to work. I'm embarrassed to admit, but my wimpy radial arm saw needed 2 passes to cut these. I did some light jointing just to clean things up a bit and make sure the edges were at 90 degrees to each other. After that, I planed them down to 5.5 inches square so they fit into the post brackets I got. Keep in mind, these posts were rough cut, so they're actually just a tick over 6 inches square when I got them. I framed up some temporary support walls to hold the roof while I installed the posts. I don't know the total pro way of doing this, but I just cut and fit each stud so it needs to be lightly tapped in with a hammer. I use screws to hold all the temporary stuff in place. Taking out the old walls was super easy. 3 nails top, 2 nails bottom, and fortunately the nails at the bottom were concrete nails that were not properly driven in and then just bent over. I use a plumb bob to find a starting point. From there I draw out a map of the post and how I'm going to cut it. I do this because the concrete and roof are not totally in phase with each other, so I'm going to bias both posts a little to the right if you're looking at the front of the house. If I didn't do this, the post on the left would be nearly hanging off the concrete pad. I like to throw in a little epoxy when using concrete anchors, especially when the concrete is of dubious nature. It's the belt and suspenders approach. Next up, I measure, mark, and begin cutting the posts. Battery-powered circ saws really are the cat's pajamas. Funny how I never knew how annoying the cord was until it was gone. I would assume the same goes for cordless nail guns, but I'm not going to try one because I'll end up spending a ton of money on cordless nail guns if I do. Like so many things in life, my circ saw is inadequate, so the cut is completed with a handsaw. After the bulk of the waste has been removed, I clean up the leftovers with a plane and chisel. This wood is cedar, which is known for its rot resistance. Even still, I add butyl flashing tape to the bottom of the posts to help prevent water from wicking. Of course, the shop apprentice needs to get in on the action as well. I don't think it's obvious here, but the post bracket has some side-to-side play, so I get the post in place and adjust it sort of left to right until it's plumb. Then I tighten the bracket down. From there, I drive the post home. The top is driven in until it makes contact. The bottom can be driven in more or less to make that direction plumb. I want to make it totally clear that the shaking was me bumping the camera, not the roof structure wobbling. Also, I would like to call attention to my professionalism. I nearly knocked over my camera, but I maintained my composure, kept my massive arm out of the shot, and continued the show. So, yeah, you're welcome, YouTube. First post in and the temporary supports come down. I have to say, nothing better than being able to work on our home and have my kids around where I can hear them laugh and goof off. I'm very fortunate to be able to tackle projects like this and then be able to share them with you. So thank you very much for following along. Things always seem to go faster the second time around, especially when you speed up the clips more. Second post in, and the boss makes an appearance to ensure top quality and maximum productivity. Here I'm layering two pieces of PVC trim together to make them thicker. So I have to admit, at this point I was in I'll figure it out as I go mode. At first I was going to clad the posts to give them kind of a frame and panel look and then paint them white. As I thought about it, I felt the house needed something natural to kind of break up the huge contrast between the white trim color and the gray wall color. I was thinking it would look too sterile without something else. So I decided to go all natural and oil the posts, leaving them that nice wood color. This left me thinking that the posts would need some company. So I thought that some shiplap love was needed to help tie the entrance together. As I use it more, I'm really liking this PVC trim. I've used quite a bit of it around our compound. It seems expensive, however, boards are consistent and usable from end to end. It flops around nicely without breaking, so one-man installation is possible even for super long pieces. Of course, it's also rot-proof, so that's awesome. The downside is I can't get it in 1-inch thickness without ordering it and paying for shipping. At this point, I've trimmed out the shiplap love area. I've taken careful measurements and purchased materials accordingly. I decided two things. One, I would mill up my own shiplap love using 8-foot fence pickets, because the pre-milled cedar tongue and groove boards available, in addition to being ugly, were also very expensive. I also decided that the posts needed some crown molding and base molding. So let's get going. After cleaning one edge, I move on to the planer. And, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to slow this planer down, because this is a couples only skate. I was only planning to do one pass on each side, because I don't have all day. So I thought the slowest speed would offer the best chance for a nice surface. Next up, I made the two edges parallel at the table saw. After that, I decided the slower speed at the planer didn't leave a good enough surface after all. So I awoke the mighty wide belt sander. I did one pass with 80 grit and the platen engaged, and this did the trick. Fence pickets are looking less like fence pickets and more like proper lumber. So now it's time to mill the two needed rabbets. I zero out the shaper height, then set it for just over 1/4 inch. Due to my chosen career path and my opinions on dealing illegal narcotics, I don't think I'll have a better time to tell you to say hello to my little friend. Here's my latest toy. This is a power feeder, and it's got lots of wheels, adjustable speed. It flips from vertical to horizontal quickly, and most importantly, it keeps my fingers away from danger. So yeah, I think this would be Tony Montana approved if he were a carpenter. The shop apprentice has shown enough interest these days that now he has his own eye protection and earmuffs with AM/FM receiver. Sometimes he puts the muffs on and cranks some tunes just to ignore his sister. I slop on some boiled linseed oil, let it soak in for a bit, then wipe off the excess. Easy and beautiful. I wanted a nice consistent nailing surface, so I planed down some 2x4s to just under 1 inch. This time at full speed for those wondering. I screwed them in place and I snapped some chalk lines. I'm not going for perfect, but I wanted the lines as a visual guide as to where I would shoot the nails into the shiplap. First course is always the most important to get right. Since nothing is flat, square, plumb, or anything else, it's always difficult to figure a reference for the first course. I measured as best I could and nailed the first board in. I'm using some 1/8 inch plywood as spacers. Each board gets 8 nails, 2 at each 2x4. I use the shoe of the nail gun to make sure they're spaced evenly from the edges of the boards. Somewhere along the line, I thought it would be a good idea to install some can lights versus a traditional porch light. The problem is I put in two 6-inch lights. They were so bright, I was worried that planes on final approach to the Denver International Airport would land on my driveway. So when installing the shiplap lathe, I decided to downsize to 4-inch lights. I also added a couple more in the soffits out in front of the posts, which brought down the volume of light to slightly too much. Quick note, the other electrical thingy hanging down closer to the door is a dusk to dawn switch because I'm too lazy to turn the light switch on and off. I drilled the hole for the second can light and installed the rest of the boards. I'm working fast to try and beat our afternoon rain shower. We have really been fighting the weather for the last several weeks. Keep in mind, I've been replacing windows, reframing exterior walls, adding trim, etc. I guess that's one way to ensure that it rains. Begin exterior construction on your house. The boss came out and asked if I was going to cover the gaps around the edge of the shiplap, to which I said, "Really?" So I popped on this last piece of trim, which I was planning to do anyway because I'm a consummate professional. When I was buying the fence pickets, I also found a couple of 2x8 cedar boards that I'm now going to turn into some crown and base moldings. The moisture meter shows which one is drier, and that's going to be the one for the crown molding. Nothing fancy, just a simple cove. That should do the trick. So I clean up the boards and cut them to a manageable length. Next up, I set up a couple of fences for the table saw. If you've never seen or used this trick, it's pretty much magic. It's a very neat way to cut a cove into a board. Some may be asking, why not use your shaper, Mike? Well, I don't have a cove cutter, and remember, I'm making up this design as I go. The key to this method after clamping the fences in place is just to take small cuts, say less than 1/8 of an inch. Take as many passes as needed to get the desired cove. After the cove is ready, a few cuts need to be made to turn this board with a cove in it into crown molding. There are two common spring angles for crown molding, 38 degrees and 45 degrees. I decided to go with 45 degrees for this so that I could run the pieces laying flat and the saw would only need to be set one time. On this last cut, I didn't set the saw blade quite high enough, so I had to break the little last piece off. It wasn't cut all the way through. I made the top edge bigger so the PVC fascia I put on earlier would have a place to tie into the crown. Also, some sanding was needed, of course, but I'm using 100 grit, so it went real fast. Okay, stop what you're doing. I want everyone to look at me because it's time for a pro tip. Next time you're cutting crown, remind yourself that crown is always cut upside down, so the top of the crown molding is on the saw bed. If you make it that far, remember that outside corners, the top is longer, and on inside corners, the bottom is longer. Once I got these principles down in my think piece, well, I've never cut anything wrong to begin with, but now I'm even further away from miscutting an angle. Anytime I'm working on my own house, I like to experiment a little. In this case, I'm going to test how good Tight Bond 3 is outdoors. I'll do a follow-up video in like 20 years to see how things went. These are Collins miter clamps. Love these things. They're a must-have for outside corners. My plan is to build a 3-sided assembly and then add the 4th side as I'm installing the crown molding on the post. A test fit reveals that my miters are good enough, so on with the real deal. Quick song recommendation, The Weller Man by Nathan Evans. It's a remake of an old sea shanty. It's a good enough song, but my kids love it and play it on repeat like 100 times in a row. so it's been rhythmically beaten into every fiber of my being. But it is neat to see the kids developing their own tastes. The base molding is just a flat board with angles cut on the top and bottom to help shed water. Installation is a breeze. I notch the fascia, slide the crown in place, and clamp the fourth piece on. I use a couple nails to hold everything in place permanently. I pre-oiled some of the areas that I wouldn't be able to get to, and the posts are certainly darker, but at this point they have been outside for probably a couple weeks. So naturally they will absorb more oil. My plan is to come back in a few months and oil everything again. I think at that point the color will be a lot closer. I needed to add some super secret notching to the baseboards so they'd fit around the post brackets. I also spaced them up off the concrete so that this area can dry out easily. I glued and taped them, and a couple of nails will hold them in place permanently. As you can tell from these finished shots, there's still lots of work to be done to include a new front door. Hopefully those projects can be turned into videos as well. Overall, I'm happy with the outcome. I think given the starting point, the results are pretty nice. My hope was adding a little spice without attracting too much attention. And I'll tell you what, I just love working on the house so much. I hope you enjoyed following along. Thank you for watching. Until next time.